Joey, how are you?
How am I? I am full of gratitude and a hint of, let's say, intimidation. Yeah. How are you?
Man, I am not, I'm definitely full of gratitude. I don't think you should feel intimidation at all. We're
Okay.
here talking about Vallivue.
How can you not
School
feel
District.
intimidated when I'm in the same studio where, the Secretary of State sat here, the Speaker of the House sat here.
You know what's okay? Let me tell you something.
I'm just the second fiddle for Vallivue.
Oh my God,
So-
the second fiddle. Listen to me. You know what's interesting about, I was telling you before, I don't get out much. Okay. So like I go from my house to my studio to like the Y to hang out and then back to my house. And so all of the people I know and meet, I meet them in a vacuum. So I'm not like, I went to an election. I got invited to an election night party in, what was it, May? The primaries were in May. And I went in there, I'm like, oh, there's, Mike Moyle or like Ted Hill. But I only know them as like the dude sitting across the table from me and we're like drinking coffee and talking trash. I don't know them as people like, oh, no. Like in this structure, this is a really important person.
Okay.
So, like Secretary of State Phil McGrain, he comes in here and he drinks his energy drink and I drink coffee and we like make some jokes and then we record it. So like, we're just people.
Right. So totally different vibe for me. You dropped Mike Moyle's name. So for example, Boy Scouts, my kiddos in Boy Scouts, Mike Moyle comes as a guest speaker at the Middleton Pack, right? My mind's like, everybody be as respectful as you possibly can. This is Mike Moyle. Whether you agree with his politics or not,
These are Boy Scouts? How old? Like the 13-year-olds care about politics at this point? Or are you talking to the parents?
No. No, I'm talking.
You're like, listen, Brian, shut up.
Hey, I completely forgot something.
What's
So
that?
we've officially started. I brought a game for us to play.
Okay.
I mentioned chess, but I was like, no, Matt's going to wreck me in chess. So
Rick, chess.
So we're going to do something that's a little more at my level. Let's play some bingo. The ranch edition. All right, I'm gonna pull it out. Okay.
Okay, get your bingo out. Hang on, let me. I'll get a third camera set up. Hang on a sec.
All right, and we're back.
Bingo.
Okay.
Do you have bingo?
Bingo,
set up?
I do.
Okay, let's go.
By the way, this podcast was brought to you by MTU Studios. If you need some help with your podcast,
no,
hit this guy up.
I stopped putting those ads up.
Why is that?
You know what's interesting about podcasts is most people. A video I saw on podcasts before I got going years back. It was this gal saying, "Hey, look. There's an infinite capacity for people to do podcasts, but the people doing the podcast, you have to be comfortable talking with at least 100 different things." She's like, if you can make a list of 100 things to talk about with your particular topic, then you should start a podcast. But what you find when you start helping people with podcasts is most people have they have a particular issue and they got about 3 episodes worth to talk about.
Gotcha.
And after that, they're like, no, I said my piece. Like I didn't like... I thought I was going to do a podcast against wasteful community spending. But in reality, I was just not happy about this park the city wanted to put in. Now that I've said my piece about the park, I don't really know anything else.
Short.
Yeah.
I hope the lifespan for this podcast, The Ranch, goes for a long time.
Well, listen, man, here's the thing. I get to have people like you who come in. So I don't even have the burden of the knowledge base. That's the beautiful thing about my thing. I'm an idiot. I have a decentralized value add.
Hey, you're an idiot? Man, I just got my bingo square filled real quick. So,
oh my God.
All right, so here's our bingo.
Okay, let's go.
All right, the Ranch podcast bingo.
Oh my God, you actually have the ranch. I'm taking a picture of this. Oh my gosh. You made this custom?
Heck yeah, this is fun. Hey, this is the teacher in me coming out.
Oh my gosh. Were you a classroom teacher before an administrator?
Oh, heck yeah. Loved it.
What were you teaching?
I hit my groove whenever I was doing alternative education at the middle school level, teaching English. So most of my time was spent doing 7th, 8th, and sometimes 9th grade speech, stuff like that. All right, here you are, Matt.
God bless you. So
and here I am. All right, so let's see here. You called yourself an idiot. I think I got a square for that.
Oh my God, that's how we're doing this? Every time I call myself an idiot.
Let's see here. There's some kind of like self-deprecation in here.
Okay, we'll have to look these up. Oh yeah, Matt Joey self-deprecates. Boom, I got that one.
Boom, same here.
Done.
Oh, Matt mentions coffee. You did that.
Oh
A
God.
little bit earlier. Hey, when is this going to be published, by the way?
When would you like to be published?
Before October 11th.
We can do that. What's today? October 5th?
The reason why I say that is because my brother, technically my stepbrother, he's coming into town to do a Johnny Cash tribute band concert. and he's been doing it for 17 years. He's fantastic, and he's coming to Caldwell, then Pocatello, Caldwell the 11th, Pocatello the 12th.
God bless him, man.
But he's donating 20% of his ticket sales to scholarships for kids in the Caldwell School District and the Vallivue School District. So bam, go to cashtribute.net, get your tickets, support education, and have a good time while doing it.
Joey Palmer coming in with the plug. And again, what's the location in Caldwell?
College of Idaho and the Jewett Auditorium, but I like to think of it as a Grand Ole Opry Auditorium for that evening. I'll be opening for my brother as Hank Williams, and he'll be doing his Johnny Cash.
God bless you, sir.
He'll go low, and I'll do some yodels. It'll be fun.
So let me, I actually found out about Vallivue. I had Alicia Purdy in here, who's a fantastic, she had such a great point that I thought was so well articulated and bared repeating, in that she's like, listen, I am a conservative, gun-toting Texan woman who also happens to love to teach. And the idea that the public education system is being dominated or usurped by people that have some like liberalized agenda. She's like, why do you think that? If we're living in Caldwell, if we're living in Nampa, if we're living, if we are your community members, she was saying, as she was, like, why? We're the same people that you are. We just happen to have this particular job. And I thought that was such a valuable thing, which is like, why? Yeah. Like, if you're living here and you're enjoying your life here and you're engaged in education here, you're likely just as conservative and similar valued as other people. Now, you do get the same flip side in, say, California. Comparing California to Idaho is, I think, one of your tokens. You do get the same thing in California. You get community members that feel righteously justified in talking about, ridiculous agendas. You have people that feel like they're the ones that should be raising your children. California in general, as the state, has a very clear idea about where they fit into your parenting and your family, which again, I find to be very distasteful. But those are real things in that area, but those are not, they're real things in that area because that's what the community values. But what the community values here is different.
Right. I agree. And a lot of the people that are from California and Idaho, like myself, are political refugees. So they're not up here trying to Californicate, or however we want to say that verb. They're here to get away from that madness that they see. So I came up to Idaho just because of the cost of living was cheaper. I came up from Huntington Beach, California, had a half bedroom, $675 for half of a bedroom a month. My wife wanted to get married. She was going to Biola University. I was like, there's no way we can get married. We can't afford that here. And then we came up to Idaho because it just felt like they were giving away, houses to live in. It was so cheap compared to, where I came from. And now I'm just thrilled to be in Idaho because of the conservative values. I feel blessed to be able to raise my two children in Idaho because of the community vibe that we have here. So yeah, I'm having a hard time finding these villains that people are saying is trying to ruin our state.
Okay. Most people, I think, are establishing their worldview on things like public education. They establish their worldview not based on empirical evidence. And some people do come with, some people bring bad experiences like I did originally. I brought bad experiences from the public school system in my former state up to Idaho with me.
Which part of the state?
I was in Northern California in the Bay Area.
Which part of the Bay Area?
I was in Danville. So my kids were originally going to school in San Ramon Valley Unified, and we had pulled them out because we were having these bad experiences. So I think some people do bring up justified bad experiences, and they're frustrated about that. Now, it's not fair, obviously, to be frustrated with Idaho public schools because something bad happened back there. But for the people that haven't gone through that, for the people that haven't actually had a bad experience with public schools, most people make their worldview, they form their worldview off of what they view off their phone. And what they view off their phone is largely either inflammatory, upregulated nonsense, has no obligation to the truth. I'm not saying it never happens. These things could never find representation. Like it's impossible to say you'll never have somebody working in a public school in Idaho that says something dumb or something woke or whatever. Like that's just not reality. I say dumb things all the time, right? Lucky for you, I'm not employed by Vallivue. I'd get in trouble. But the point is, you have people that that largely view public schools as villainous because of things they've seen off their phone. It's like, guys, that's not fair. Like that's not even close to reality.
Right. It's interesting because I taught at Nampa Christian private school, high school for 2 years. And then obviously I went over to the public school system after that. And the staffing at Nampa Christian, and I would say a large majority of the staffing, I can speak for Vallivue, it seemed pretty much the same, honestly. People with conservative values with hearts for kids. It's as simple as that. And so to be able to say, you know, we're trying to give pornographic materials to kiddos from school libraries, or trying to get kids to do something different with their gender, I'm not seeing it at all. And that's in the classroom, and that's at an administrative level. And I would be the first one to say time out, kind of a thing.
Right.
So,
100%. The other thing that that Vallivue has done recently that is in sharp contrast to surrounding districts is you guys were able to pass a really significant funding measure that other districts in the area have not been able to do. Right? Was it a bond or a levy? I can't remember. Recently, you guys passed
recently it was a bond. Yeah, for
bond for buildings.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I talked to actually former Senator Chris Trakel about this. I obviously talked to Alicia Purdy about it. And there was an aspect of, look, we're not just going to tell you what's happening. Come in and see it. Bring the community into the conversation, because even the most staunchly conservative fiscal hawk in the community doesn't want to see elementary kids with in a building with a roof that's leaking, or with like a sewer line that's leaking, or they don't want that. They want to eliminate wasteful spending.
Right.
But once you help share the problem and communicate with them effectively, so that it's not this boogeyman out in the world. It's like, it's not just this behemoth of a organization, taxing district that keeps drawing money. It's like, no, that's Joey. And like, Joey's trying to fight for that kid, and there's the water coming. Like, that's not okay.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing. I appreciate that. I hope people would extend that grace to me as a person. And I'd try to extend that same grace to Chris Trakel, former representative. A lot of people think the world of Chris Trakel. A lot of people think he's the devil incarnate, right? And I was like, hey, Chris isn't as great as people think he is. Chris isn't as bad as people think he is. Chris is just Chris. And it's the same thing with Joe, and it's the same thing with Matt. So what I did was I asked Chris.
No, I'm definitely as bad as people think I am. I'm actually way worse.
Actually, you know what? You are kind of an edgy guy. Before you put your headphones on, I noticed the cauliflower ear. How many fights have you been in?
I mean, paid fights or random.
Oh, dang.
I've actually never been in I've never been in an actual fight.
Okay.
Like a playground fight. I've never been in there. Like, I've done professional fights and stuff, but nothing. Like, there's no point in fighting. It's like, listen, did I step on your toe? I'm sorry. My apologies. Like, did I spill your, like, let me get you another drink. Did I spill your drink? I'm sorry.
But if there's a referee in a ring, it's game on, right?
Hey, look, I'm a sportsman. I don't like conflict, but it's undeniable. There's an aspect of like, man, I get it. I actually like black out. It's like,
because you're so zoned in.
Like when I go there, I did a few really awesome high promotion quality fights in the late teens, right before COVID, quite unfortunately. And I would see videos of myself later. I'm like, I don't even remember walking up. Like, I get so flipped out because I get so anxious.
Hey, I love that feeling.
Yeah,
I like that. Anyways, I don't want to totally derail everything I'm trying to say, but to the Chris Trakel point, rather than just being like, look at what he did at the Caldwell School Board, let's stay away from him and be scared. Absolutely not. We're all, like you said, we're all people. So I invited him over, or I can't remember if he reached out. Either way, I was like, heck yeah, absolutely. I appreciate this opportunity to get to know you and show you around Vallivue. So we toured an elementary school, and I showed him a middle school, introduced him to some principals, just had a good, solid conversation, got to know where his heart at, what his values are, how he functions. And, by the end of the day, we both had a mutual appreciation for each other. And at the same time, I think he ended the day saying, so how much do you get per year from your plant facility levy? $2 million. And now, like you said, he's a fiscal conservative to the extreme.
Sure.
And he said $2 million to be able to take care of 13 schools. That's ridiculous. There has to be better funding than that. And I was like, fantastic. Most people,
my thoughts exactly, Senator.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's not like we're going to agree on everything, but for goodness sakes, let's humanize each other. Like you were saying, like why are people at the top assuming the worst on the bottom, and then the bottom are going like, what are you doing to us? You know, and I think that's where policy can actually be a very beautiful thing. Politics. A lot of people think of politics and they go, oh, people are nasty to each other. We can't agree. We get our heart rate increases and we just feel frustrated with each other. To me, I think policy in those kind of discussions is sacred. It's all about how are we going to best live together, even though we have disagreements and completely different perspectives. How are we going to figure out how to be at peace with each other and live together as best as we possibly can? So I think that's hopefully what we can do.
Man, I think that's really, really well said.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And again, that I have yet to have a guest in that leaves and I'm like, oh, that person's a terrible person. Even if I disagree with people, and there are plenty of people that I've had in, they're like, I don't really see eye to eye with this person. But that doesn't mean I don't see where the person's coming from, right? It doesn't mean I don't value the person for speaking their mind. And truthfully, anybody willing to come in and sit down and just like, hey, you know what? This is what I think.
Right.
I'm like, good for you, man.
Yeah.
Because most people just won't do that. They don't want a human interaction. They want to be able to say really terrible things and play this game on the interwebs. And if you're willing to be a person, then I respect that.
Right. I agree 100%. In fact, one thing I'm proud of for the Vallivue School District is our board chair, Tony Brenniger. She had the idea of every year before the legislative session, let's get our representatives together in the Vallivue boardroom, and let's bring in some local superintendents too, and let's hear what some of the issues are from the legislators' perspective, and then also let's have our turn to be able to share our perspectives on upcoming legislation. Well, this year was unique. Basically, what happened was we had the people who had won the primaries, and so we had a room full of Democrats and Republicans in the room. It was fantastic. And everyone was great at listening to the superintendents because we went on and on and on, as we can. And they were great listeners. But at one point, one person who's running tried to put on blast another person. And it's like, no, that's not what we're here to do. We're not here to pile on somebody or to call somebody out. We're here to just ask good questions, articulate our perspectives, and then take that, chew on it, sleep on it, and see if it moves the needle one way or another on our perspectives.
Yeah, the whole taking every opportunity to campaign, and not just like, look, if you have somebody who's campaigning and you ask them to come in and articulate their points and their values, okay, like that's a valuable thing, right? But when you're literally saying, hey, we need functional brainstorming.
I like that phrase.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
you can feel free to take it, but it's like I need to know what the functional issues are that we're addressing, or the problems that you see, and only in doing that can we actually start working towards a resolution.
Right.
I think a lot of times though, people get hung up on, hey, look, I don't actually want to deal with resolving problems. I would just like to highlight differences and my problems with that person, right? Like I don't have my own particular, this is actually something I was telling somebody recently. Anytime people mention California when they're dealing with a political campaign, I instantaneously shut off. I'm like the switch just drops, because if you're in this state and we have real problems in this state, we have real issues in this state, if you're trying to get me to vote for you by referencing the problems or drama in a different state, I instantly like, nope, I'm not listening to you. I need to know what you think the problems are here, what's happening here, how we need to resolve here.
Let's deal with our own household.
Right. And I think that's a marketing mechanism for people that, because like when I first moved here, I was very anxious about my former state and what had happened. And I was totally susceptible to somebody be like, oh no, we're doing the opposite of what they did. I'm like, that's my guy. He's going to do the opposite of what I came from. And obviously with time, as things go on, it's like, wait a minute, but what are you going to do? Don't just tell me you're going to do the opposite. Like, tell me how that actually applies here. And I asked that question a couple of times of various people, and I realized really quickly, like, oh, this person actually has an answer, and that person, they have no answer. They just know to say, we don't want what's in California.
Right. Yeah. Anyone could do that. That's being a parrot. That's being yeah. Well said.
Well, the other thing is that we have a constitutional mandate
Mhm.
for public schools.
Mhm.
That's not going away. And there are a lot of people that are wanting to continue. How do we articulate this? There are people that are looking at Idaho public schools as something that they have to manage and somehow get around in order to get on with the rest of their lives. Instead of saying, hey, look, we have a constitutional mandate to have this. Let's have the best possible version.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate to me, right? And it's unfortunate for a number of reasons, but specifically it's like, hey, look, if instead of looking at the public schools as something you just had to get around and navigate through, if you looked at it as like, okay, how could we make these the best instead of just saying they're terrible, we should burn them all down, then we would probably have a great version of it. And if people were responsible for resolving problems, then we would have a lot more problems solved.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I recently listened to the Lori Den Hartog. I think she would probably take exception with how you phrase that. Let's burn them all down, just get around it and move on and do what we want.
I didn't say Lori felt that way.
Okay.
I said there are some people that feel this way.
Okay. I guess maybe my assumption is she would be in that camp. And so I'm glad you corrected me on that, because I really appreciated her when she said, no, we want all people to thrive and be vibrant, right?
She had the most reasonable perspective ever, which was ultimately, we may need to spend more money and fund alternate education methods. I was like, that's so honest. Because if you look at it as a zero-sum game where it's like any dollar taken away from or given to the private school has to come from the public school with vouchers, right? If you look at it that way, you start getting this like real push-pull, because people are like, wait, my budget's already trash. I only have my $2 million as you are. It's like, if you take $500,000 or $1 million of that, and I'm down to $1 million for these 13 different school sites, that's a huge problem. But her perspective is like, hey, why don't we have two robust, vibrant systems? We don't need to have it be only one. I thought her perspective was so incredibly fair. Maybe not viable.
Yeah, I appreciate her honesty. Of course, that was fantastic. I think the part that kind of I get hung up on is how's that fiscally conservative to be able to set up. So what was it? The Idaho Center of Fiscal Policy, they did their study and they said, okay, if we're going to put up a parallel system of education opportunities, one where we fund private education and also public education, that would cost the state of Idaho somewhere around $360 million. Well, whenever we hear about Prop 1 and people say, well, one of the reasons why I'm going to vote no for Prop 1 is because that would come with a price tag of about $40 million. That's not worth it. But on the other hand, it's worth the price tag of who knows how many $100 million to be able to do what voucher proponents are saying. That doesn't necessarily seem like that aligns with fiscal conservative values.
Well, I guess it depends on what your outcome should be.
Oh, well, that's another thing too. The outcomes, that kind of bothers me as well. On one hand, so they say, let the outcomes be the responsibility of the private schools. They shouldn't have to answer to the government. They just get the government money, but they don't have to answer to them and say, take the standardized test or anything like that.
Right.
Just trust us with the outcomes. It's parent choice. It's freedom. However, that's so unfair because public schools, who are also getting those tax dollars, we are beholden to those government expectations. We do have to show outcomes. We do have to take their tests and show how we're doing. So why are we saying that public schools getting funded by public dollars have to follow these rules, but the private schools that get public dollars, but they get a pass on those accountability measures?
This is actually one of the things that I'm very curious about, and in that I always relate it to running a marathon. It's like, listen, if you want to compare times and say like Joey's a faster runner than Matt, probably are, fine, good for you, whatever. But it's not fair to compare times on a marathon if Joey only has to run, 20 miles and Matt's running 26.2, right? You have to have, we can't say that, oh, they have a better educational system if we're not allowed to gauge and understand the metrics for how you're getting that determination. Like, you can only say it's better if you compare identical things.
Well, that's another point. I'm glad you brought that up, is because, we talk about school choice, and parents should have a choice. I believe in that 100%. But oftentimes is the case, it's the schools making the choice about which students they want. And so there's got to be measures put in place too to make sure if they're getting public dollars, we have to make sure they're also not discriminating, and they have to play by the same anti-discrimination rules that public schools have to play by. We take everybody, SPED, ML, multilingual. We got to do strength-based descriptor there.
Did you say strength-based descriptor?
Right. Sorry. That's probably.
No,
Anyways.
is this highlighting a differential between students by saying it's a positive thing?
Right. Yeah.
God bless you, sir.
Yeah, it's going to change.
Strength-based.
It went from
I've never heard of that.
ESL to ELL to ML. My favorite one is emergent bilingual, but not everyone's emergent bilingual. Maybe they're emergent trilingual. So, but anyways, that's the new.
That's the new acronym.
That's the latest,
the new buzz.
The most appropriate one. Yeah, ML. But the point is like we take every student. And then,
and you have an obligation to take every student.
Absolutely.
Right?
And we want to, because they're part of society. And, I love people. And I think that's why I'm in this business, is because people are sacred, especially the most marginalized people. And so absolutely, we need to take them. The kids with behavior problems, the kids that are gifted and talented without behavior problems, and everyone in the middle. Right. So whereas people that are in private schools running those shows, they have a completely different criteria for determining how long a student gets to stay and for what rationale they excuse them from their school. And then they keep the funding, but then where are those kids going to go to school? They're coming back to the public school. And so, yeah, we have fixed costs with less money because it followed the kiddo to a completely different school. And I would say, hey, I'm all for competition. That's another thing that drives me crazy, is they're always saying like, oh, public school system is afraid of competition. Bring the competition. Yeah, that's going to help us level up. But let's only compete if we're also playing by the same rules.
That, again, fair points. That I had a student years ago, and super cool girl, was going to a private Catholic school in the area, very nice Catholic school in the Bay Area. And she started having some issues, and they were like, couldn't quite figure out what was going on with her. She would kind of like zone out, and they initially thought that she had like ADD and stuff. But it turns out that she was having seizures. She just didn't have the physical manifestation of like the grand mal. Right. So they find out, they're like, wait, because she'd like black out essentially for like a minute, and they like couldn't get her attention. And then she would kind of like come back online, and she just, again, didn't have the physical accompaniment. And the private school looked at her and said, hey, you need some really specific help, and you're not getting it from us. You got to go. So they kicked her out. They were like, listen, you can't come back to the school. Like, we're not equipped to deal with you.
Right.
So here was somebody that they were like, listen, we'll take you and take your $20,000 a year when you didn't need anything different. Mm-hmm. But the second you need something different, look, we're glad we've had you since like K to, I think she was a junior when she got the boot.
Yeah.
So here she had gone to this private Catholic system for 11 years, K through 10. Mm-hmm. And then at the extreme, right at the end, when they're like, hey, you need something different than what we have, goodbye. That's a real consideration.
And it's as easy as that.
Right.
There's no way public schools could pull that off, nor should we.
And this is, I mean, truthfully, it's not, I don't see this just as being an issue with private schools. I also, this is kind of a bone I have to pick with charter schools in general too. And I know charter schools offer a lot of opportunity for community-based and community-driven education. It's like, hey, these are things, this is our charter. It's going to reflect our community values, all of these things. That's fine. And we should have that. But again, the comparison needs to be clear. The competition needs to be a more refined and nuanced thing, which is, hey, you can't just say this charter school is getting these results. If the charter school has an application process, people can be kicked out. They don't have to deal with, people coming from, whatever it might be, or like they're allowing people to come from geographic areas that are not the geographic areas of the neighborhood schools. Like, you don't get to say you're crushing when you pick the cream from the top.
Exactly. And the promise that charter schools was going to create was that test scores would be better. That would be the measure. So there's states where they've had charter schools in place for 3 decades, and they're saying, actually, dang it, even though we advocated for charter schools, the data is not bearing out the way we thought it would. They're not necessarily, when you compare apples to apples or oranges to oranges, it's not, we're not crushing it like we thought we would. Right. So
it's a tough thing. Like, education is a tricky mistress.
Oh yeah.
Like, it is we need really high quality education. We need the best we can possibly get.
Right.
We need our students to be as relevantly equipped for the real world as possible. And that's the struggle, right?
Yeah.
Relevance is what is relevant, what is relevant in people's lives. And this is where you get more faith-based education. They're like, listen, you don't need this level of math. I need you to be a good person. And I want your personal values to come from this faith-based thing. So, and, you know, not all schools are committed to that particular thing, but you have people arguing over what education should be. And at the end of the day, everyone's agreeing it should be relevant based on what the parents and community want.
Right.
But that's a really tough thing no matter what you do.
Right.
Like it's not self-evident what the best education mechanisms are. It's not readily apparent how to best bring an 18-year-old into existence as an adult and have them function the most prosperously and effectively in communities.
Yeah, amen to that. I have nothing to add to that.
Yeah, especially with the budgetary constraints.
Right.
Like, give me an unlimited budget, I can do a lot of things.
Yeah, no kidding. I think another thing that kind of drives me crazy about the whole voucher conversation is when people say, they'll point the finger at the adults in public education and say, oh, dang it. You gotta. Yeah,
I got the vouchers before you.
As they say, what are you afraid of, adults in public education? Is the system built for the adults, or is the system built for children? And the truth is, yes, the system is built for the children, and the adults that are in the system are there for the children. So it drives me crazy whenever they try to say, oh, the reason why you don't like vouchers is because you're just trying to protect your neck, protect your job. You're saying that to the people who are dedicating their lives, their energy, and their own funds from their own pocket because we're underfunded to provide classroom supplies and special education teachers, for example. You know, we always have support the blue, support the red line, things of that nature. We need a line support special education teachers. They're doing fantastic work. They're behavior interventionists, they're nurses, and they're also education teachers, all at the same time, every day. These aren't people that are like, no to vouchers because I'm trying to protect my neck. They're saying no to vouchers because we need all the funding we can get to be able to take care of our most kids, the kids that need the most attention and needs. So that always drives me crazy when they frame it that way.
There's in my kids' elementary school, there's a special ed teacher there who my wife and I always notice because we do a lot of volunteering and
that is awesome.
Yeah, like I love education. I love volunteering. I would go in. Oh my gosh, when one of my kids was in 5th grade, I'd go in for math like twice a week. It was once or twice a week. I can't remember what it was, but I'd go in and I had a table in the hallway, and the kids would come out, and we'd run through like a bunch of different cards, and I would give them 60 seconds to run through a series of problems, all of the stuff, and I always made jokes about like assassins, and then like it has to be done in 60 seconds or assassins. Oh. They're like, what? It's just like fifth graders are still on that cusp where they're like down to have fun, but they're getting smart enough. And it was whenever I would go to pick up afterwards, when the volunteering was over, because it was the last period of the day, so they'd end 10 minutes, I'd fix everything, go out. I'd be walking or just standing outside waiting, and kids would be walking around. They're like, assassins.
Yeah, you built that rapport.
Yeah. Like
but that's what learning is all about. Right. Relationship, rapport, so that way you can speak to that kid's heart.
You just meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Meet them where they are. I love it. So speaking of meeting where they are, we would go and volunteer. My wife would be volunteering for, other stuff. And there's a special ed teacher, and this particular school had a kid that would really struggle. I think she was on the spectrum big time. I can't remember if she was non-auditory or partially auditory, but we would occasionally see some breakdown happening, right, in the hallway. And the teachers would be like, oh, call the special ed guy. And the special ed guy would come, and it was like watching a Jedi master. Like this kid would be, for instance, like under a table having a moment, right? And the teacher would just sit down on the floor next to the table and just wait and just be there.
It's a beautiful thing.
And you would see it and you're like, and the kid would calm down instantly.
It's a beautiful thing.
And then eventually like get it together, and they'd start communicating in however they were doing it. And the kid would come out. There was no force. There was no insanity. And it was like, what did that person just do? And to see, I hear what you're saying about like people making the dialogue about public education being about the adults. And it's like, yeah, look, this guy he chose this profession. So like, yeah, that was about him, but his life is not committed to like, where's my next Bentley? Like this guy's getting on the ground next to some poor 8-year-old who's having a breakdown.
The last thing we need to do is inadvertently disrespect the people who are taking care of the most fragile kids when they're in there saying like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to read, write, express yourself, calculate some math so that way you're not manipulated by some swindler someday when you're an adult. But I'm also going to help change your diaper because you don't have the capability to do it yourself. And then we're going to get right back in the classroom and get right back to work. So why do we frame the argument this way? And I appreciate you sharing that story too, because it's almost like we're addicted to horror stories from public education. But you just shared a beautiful story it's not an isolated incident. That's an everyday incident. And I think those stories need to be shared more often.
Here's a question for you then. How do we take back, like, look, I have had bad experiences in public education.
Same here.
Not in this state, right? In other states, but those are real experiences. So anybody saying like, oh, this doesn't happen anywhere, it's like, that's a total lie. I know, like, we could call a board member that I'm buddies with back in my former state, and he could like articulate a bunch of things that have happened, in the last 12 months or 24 months.
Yeah.
But how do we reframe the education conversation in this state to be like, look, focus on this state?
Right. Well, I actually have a couple of ideas. Number one, read more. Don't just listen to the people that are in your preferred echo chamber, your hermetically sealed, sterile echo chamber with what you like to hear. Have a couple book recommendations on that, by the way.
That are Idaho specific?
Not Idaho specific, but it's always good to learn from other states, not just California. Let's spread the scope out a little bit so that way we can learn from those states, because those same conversations that we're having in Idaho already took place in other states. So let's see if we can learn from them. So, for example.
Oh, he's got books with him.
Betsy DeVos, right? She was our Secretary of State, and she's a huge advocate for the voucher system in charter schools, right?
Did you say Secretary of State?
I'm sorry.
Secretary of Education.
Secretary of Education. This is her memoir about her time when she was serving as Secretary of Education. Thanks for correcting me on that. It's called Hostages No More, The Fight for Education Freedom and the Future of the American Mind. Such a good book. If you want to understand what her heart is, I pretty much disagree with her, but I at least appreciate what she's trying to accomplish and why she's trying to get certain states there to be able to have more vouchers in charter schools.
Here's something for you.
Okay.
There's an inherent problem with public education, with public funding that I don't think has a reconciliation, that I think is worth recognizing.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, there was this pizza place, Primo's, that we used to get food from. And honestly, I didn't like Primo's that much. It was the crust was too thick. It was too oily, but like it was the spot on the corner where you'd go and like get a pizza and a beer.
As a pizza connoisseur, I would never go there.
Yeah, it was trash, but they had a great spot. Okay. And Primo's had what I consider to be a B level pizza, but Primo's did have to fight with all the other pizza places in the area to get that customer.
Good
right?
point. Yeah, good point.
And my criticism of the public schools, especially back in California, were that, look, no matter what, you can't tell me that we're getting the best possible education, even from the people doing the education, because if Primo's knew that I could only buy pizza from Primo's, no matter what you say, the pizza would go from B to B minus. It would be a little bit worse. And this was my issue with the public schools that I was very displeased with back in my former state, because it's like, we are a captive audience. Now, I'm a captive audience here as well. I like the public schools here. I think they're doing a good job. They are not perfect, but I think they are doing a good job. And this is a problem. The whole captive nature of it is a problem that we will never resolve in our current iteration of public funding.
Amen to that. Like I said earlier, that's why I'm all about competition. Competition is going to help us level up. But I have to go back to that point. I have to be a stickler with it. If we're going to compete, let's play by the same rules.
So you're not even against the idea necessarily of vouchers, as long as those getting the funding have to abide by the same regulations and rules that the public schools, say in Vallivue, have to abide by.
Amen. That's where I'm at.
That would be so lit if we could actually find out if there is a better school system. And it's like, you got to take everyone, You gotta subject yourself to these test scores. You're going to get this funding, right?
Yep.
And if you can come out on top, game on.
Yeah. I would only make one exception to that rule.
Great.
Which is, so I taught like I already said, middle school, alternative school. So I purposely went there after teaching at Napa Christian for 2 years. I was like, this place isn't quite for me. I don't really feel like I'm doing a service the way I think is most Christ-like. I want to work with the kids like the Joeys. Just quick background to give an example, not to pity party or anything like that. I grew up in a household with a dad that was pretty intense, a mom that went through, multiple marriages and stepdads and boyfriends and stuff like that. We struggle in my family. Unfortunately, we struggle with alcoholism. Thank God I don't. I don't know how I missed out on that. But it's so bad that my sister still struggles with it to this day. I have another sister that was 5 years older than me. When I was 8 years old, she took her life when she was in juvenile hall. So that's the background I come from. Those are the people I want to serve. Those are the kids I want to serve. So what's the exception to the rule that I'm talking about? The school that I went to, a middle school, alternative school, those schools are full of Joeys coming from the not most secure background. Right. And so they're not necessarily functioning at their optimal best, right? And so the state identified our school at one point as the lowest 5% performing in the state. And they came in and they said, all right, we're going to help you. You got to figure out what you got to do to get better as a school. And it's like, okay, we're going to do our best to work with you to get out of that 5%. So that way we're not the worst performing in the school. Right. But by design, our school was built to be able to bring in the students who need more attention, smaller class sizes. And so we purposely graduate students, move them on so that way they can go to high school. And then we look at the middle schools and we say, all right, what's our next batch of kids that are lowest performing? So that way we can serve them as best as we possibly can. We will never be a top performing school. Are you telling me you're going to shut down that alternative school then because we're not meeting the mark? Right? Does that make sense?
Well, sure. I mean, essentially there's not an even distribution. Like that's the whole point of our alternative schools. It's like, hey, look, there are 6 middle schools in the area, and we're going to take the most at-risk, lowest performing, most difficult situation students from 5 of them, and we're going to put them all in the 6th. Yep. And then all of a sudden somebody comes along, they're like, hey, 6th middle school, you're underperforming the other 5. It's like, I know. Right. Specifically because that was the agreement. We will take the most at-risk, difficult cases. And yeah, we're going to have lower scores, but this is how this works, right? Because somebody has to take those kids. We can't just say, hey, you're difficult, or like, look, I heard this. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of government programs around things like nutrition. Okay. But I have an appreciation for being very hungry. And like when I was in middle school, and even high school, I remember this distinctly. Like all through my high school career, I didn't have, like my mom didn't make me lunch. I didn't know, what the food situation was at home. I remember one time my senior year in high school, I went to swim practice, and I was captain of the swim team at the time. Not like I was some fantastic Olympic swimmer, but I was captain of the swim team. My coach grabbed me. He was like, "What's wrong with you today? You're dragging." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't get anything to eat." And he's like, "Well, like after school?" I'm like, "No, since yesterday." And here it is, like 4:00 in the afternoon. And by the way, I had gone through doing my paper route in the morning, going to school, going to my calculus class, honors chem class, going to band, and then I was in.
You were redlining all day,
redlined. Now, like I did not have the fastest swim times. I did not have the best GPA, but for what I was running off of, the fuel I had, as all the way through, it's like I was doing the best I could. Yeah. Right. And so I have an appreciation for hey, we need to supply some base level of nutrition or calories for people because that will yield better results overall. So if you took a whole school of kids in my situation, and I know a lot of people had it worse than me, but if you take a whole school of that, like you're not going to have a lot of stellar, like one of my frustrating things working with, not frustrating, but one of the things that gave me pause is as an SAT tutor, because I was a tutor for almost 20 years, I was dealing with kids that were investing in their children. So, whatever it was, say it's like $1,000 for SAT prep, whatever it might have been. These people were putting together that $1,000 to invest in their kid to get that kid into a better college to go on. Yeah, so you're dealing with a group of population of people who are doing auxiliary investment on top in preparation for like the big investment. So these people were they were all in. And I would look at some of these kids that had, say, better GPAs, or they had better swim times, or they were better wrestlers, or they were better at trumpet, or better at whatever metric I wanted to like poo-poo on my younger self with. And that was a difficult thing for me as a younger person when I was in my 20s, seeing it's like, God, this guy's really good at swimming. Like, how does that, like, he was a lot better than I was at his age. And I would think like, man, I was trying, I must just be a really bad swimmer or something like that. And then I realized, this kid's dad owns a supplement business, and he's pumping him full of these different shakes every day, twice a day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And they're like, the parents are driving him everywhere, like, eating burgers in the car, doing whatever it has. They're just jacking him full of calories, nutrition, rest, organizing his life, investing in SAT prep, all of these things. And that was the first realization where it's like, listen, this really matters. The life outside of school will produce different results.
Right.
I could have been.
That's a beautiful illustration. Yeah.
Right. And so we are going to have kids that are less performing, not because they're unworthy of our help, but just because of the life that they have been dealt.
Right.
Like, don't tell me the 12-year-old deserves the life the 12-year-old is living. The 12-year-old's just there,
Right.
The 12-year-old gets whatever adults are hanging around the 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Quite unfortunately for some people.
Right.
You're going to have kids that have less, and you're going to have kids that perform less because of that. And that we should not say, hey, school, you're the problem.
Right.
Not all the time. And that's not to say every school is perfect, but I think you were your example, which is, look, when you're the alternative school, like, you have to have somewhere to try to help the kids that have the least.
Yep, exactly. And no school, private, charter, homeschool, public school is going to be perfect. So we're all doing the best we can. So the other book that I have on the flip side to Betsy DeVos's is Slaying Goliath by Diane Ravitch. This book perfectly shows what I was saying earlier. She kind of does a survey of all the states and vouchers and charter schools and how it's worked there, and what kind of impact did it have on them fiscally? What kind of test scores were they able to yield? What kind of discriminatory.
Thank you. There it is.
Practices have they had to take care of? Also, what kind of the boards for charter schools and whatnot, what kind of corruption did they see if it's not democratically elected board trustees? So this is another fantastic book. So I would just highly recommend that people take a chance to actually read, marinate on the arguments from both sides, because I think the voucher debate that's coming up in legislation pretty soon is going to be probably the most important topic, both fiscally to the state and also really our values as well.
What's really fortunate about being here at this time in history, there are other states like Arizona that have initiated these programs.
Yeah.
So let's just see how it works. Like, I don't think the people in Arizona are just distinctly different. Like, let's see who got the money. Let's see what happened to the public schools then.
And that's in those books. And it's interesting because Betsy DeVos uses other states as examples, as paragons for why we should do it. And then Diane Ravitch says the same thing. The same states actually look at this. And I would say all of the Idahoans need to be able to wrestle with both the facts that that DeVos and Ravitch share and decide where you come out on that. I wish that Idaho would put it out as a referendum to the people to decide if I have to get a super majority to pass a bond to build a school in the Vallivue School District, I think they should do the same thing. If you want to be able to pass legislation that says, yeah, we're going to do vouchers, public funds go to private schools, put it to the people to vote.
I like your idea about just making the standards the same. I like all of that. In fact, if they were able to do that, they're like, hey, if you want this dollar, you got to do these 12 things, and we'll give you the dollar very happily.
Yeah.
No problem. Just make sure you do these things. Eliminate your application process. Eliminate, you have to have some manner of special education here. Like you can't just boot those kids out to go to, wherever else.
Yep.
Like if you do all of those things, God bless it, man. Like you crush, you win, you have my vote.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think that would actually help alleviate some of the overcrowding that I'm experiencing at the Vallivue School District. And we're truly all in this together with the same standards of trying to meet our children's needs. We're working together at that point.
Gosh, man.
Where are we at?
Yeah, let's see.
I did.
You mentioned Johnny Cash. My hat is not backwards.
Dang it. I would love it if you just kind of...
Episode goes over 45 minutes. I think we nailed that one. Joey recommends a book. Excellent. Train of thought loss. I don't think we had that.
No. Hey, I learned something about you. Joey learns something about Matt.
There it is. Past.
Oh, yeah. I want to know about this.
Oh, I definitely referenced past ranch episode.
Oh, yes, you did.
There it is. Oh, man.
I think I did too, actually, with Lori.
Yeah.
Dan Hartog. Yeah.
Dang, we're so close. My outro sound clip.
Yeah. What is that all about? At first I was like, is that the sample from House of Pain from Mrs. Doubtfire when it's jump around? But no.
Wait, what are you talking about? With the
it's like,
oh,
what the heck is that?
It's a
How did you say?
windmill.
Oh.
The rotating windmill.
Okay.
Like metal grinding on.
That makes perfect sense now. I was like, is this like a hip hop sample or something?
Oh my, you didn't catch that? I actually had to look up metal on metal. It was like a rusted metal audio clip. Yeah. Because all the things I have to make myself, right? So like the actual image, the animation of the rotating windmill, I made that entire animation.
I don't think I've seen that. Is
that it's at the end.
Okay.
Oh, you do the audio versions. Spotify, there you go. So the creaking has an animation of a windmill rotating over. And it's like the ranch
You're such a boss, Matt. On my Spotify app, it's got Joe Rogan and then it's got Matt on the tiles right next to each other. I'm like, hey, actually, Matt's the Joe Rogan of Idaho.
God, how cool!
There's so many commonality. The brick wall, I think he has that.
Listen, I do not believe in reinventing the wheel, man. Like you find something that works, you make that happen.
Well, I appreciate you facilitating conversations for our neck of the woods specifically. I'm learning so much because of your ability to hear both sides of a topic. I can't wait to hear Tom Luna's episode about his take on Prop 1.
It was really great.
I heard Jim Jones. I'm like, hey, this is really compelling. I can't wait to hear the counter arguments. And it's because of you that I'm having a better understanding and preparing me for election day. So thank you.
You're welcome. Listen, first off, bingo. Second, I got everybody on top. Second, there's a big thing coming up. Let's do this, by the way. We've been at it for like, okay, perfect.
Do we need to wrap this up?
Yeah, let's do this because we have a lot more things to talk about. This will be first of many. But I wasn't even expecting to talk about vouchers today. I love the conversation we've had because this is, again, I think it should all come to the table. And it's only through communicating about vouchers. What are the good pieces? What are the bad pieces? How can we make this work for everybody? If we want more competition, how can we fairly insert competition, right? All of that's great stuff. But lost my train of thought. Damn it. What was I saying? I was just saying something. Tom Luna. Okay. Prop 1.
Yeah.
I actually am having Rod Beck, who closed the primaries, and Hiram Erickson, who's a precinct committee from Rexburg. He's a Republican. He's traveling in. We're doing a open debate with them this coming Monday.
In here?
Yes. So they're coming in. It's going to be an unlimited time. It's going to be my rules. It's going to be awesome. And very hopefully it's going to be spread throughout the state by this, people want it to get spread.
Matt Todd is a state treasure in Idaho.
Oh my gosh.
That is a service to Idaho. I'm pumped about that.
It's going to be so awesome, but it's going to be the only debate that is done between these two people and then shot out in this. Cause most people have forums where they're like, you know, they have a panel of 4 people and it's like, okay, 5 minutes. Why is Prop 1 good? And somebody says something and like each of the 4 people go. And by the end of the 20 minutes, you're like, I don't even like, what are we talking? Like, let's not do that. Let's have a normal conversation. Yeah. Like just Rogan has done many open debates that are just like, listen, take as much time as you want, explain your point. And then this person's going to explain their point. And like, we're not going to argue. There's no audience. So you don't have to like grandstand. We're just going to talk like normal. And I'm going to be like, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I'm
like
pumped.
None of that.
I can't wait to hear that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Anyway, listen, thank you for coming in today.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
Yeah,
we're going to make that happen. Listen, first of many, come back. I want to talk about tech in schools. Love the voucher topic. And thanks for what you're doing for Vallivue. Again, you guys are obviously doing something because the community is buying into the public education system. They're reinvesting in it. They're recognizing the value you bring. And it's not that way. And it's not a foregone conclusion that that's the situation in surrounding districts. So you guys really stand out in that way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We can't take our patrons for granted. They're great people and we need to treat them right and do the best we can. So
good for you. Thanks for sharing that.